2024 will be remembered for the return of Donald Trump. It will also go down in the history books as the year the US Democrats really screwed up, faced with a candidate who they claimed was an existential threat to democracy. Until this July, they put forward a candidate who was clearly senile. And a shocking new report in the Wall Street Journal shows just how long the United States has been governed by a man suffering from cognitive decline. The report is in the Wall Street Journal and is headlined How the White House Functioned with a Diminished Biden in Charge. It's based on interviews with 50 Democratic insiders, including, they say, people who participated in or had direct knowledge of the White House operation. And they say that since 2021, aides had been keeping meetings short and had controlled access to the president, and that they'd scripted public interactions because he couldn't do it off the cuff. Of course, they did all of this while denying there was anything wrong with the president at all. Now, at this point, you might be thinking, is any of this really a surprise? Is this really news? Are we going over the mental state of an outgoing president all over again? You already knew this. Fair enough. But some of the details in this piece are new, and they are quite extraordinary. Right? That's why I'm showing you this. For example, this. A sign that the bruising presidential schedule needed to be adjusted for Biden's advanced age had arisen early on, in just the first few months of his term. Administration officials noticed that the president became tired if meetings went long and would make mistakes. They issued a directive to some powerful lawmakers and allies seeking one-on-one time. The exchanges should be short and focused, according to people who received the message directly from White House aides. This is the shocking bit, though. If the president was having an off day, meetings could be scrapped altogether. On one such occasion, in the spring of 2021, this is right at the start of his presidency, a national security official explained to another aide why a meeting needed to be rescheduled. Quote, "He has good days and bad days, and today was a bad day, so we're going to address this tomorrow," the former aide recalled the official saying. Now, this is like you're talking about a toddler, right? So this is in 2021, and they're saying about Joe Biden, the president of the United States, he has good days and bad days, and today's a bad day, so let's push it over there. Now, you might think, well, this is very unfortunate. You know, someone's just been elected president, and they're clearly struggling. There are certain days where they're just not in a good way, so they can't have meetings. Fine. But then how do you get from that situation to saying, and he can run another 4 years in 3 years' time? You know, he can be president for another 7 years, I suppose they would have been saying at that point in time. Completely bizarre. This one was also pretty weird. They say Biden's team also insulated him on the campaign trail. In the summer of 2023, one prominent Democratic donor put together a small event for Biden's re-election bid. The donor was shocked when a campaign official told him that attendees shouldn't expect to have a free-ranging question and answer session with the president. Instead, the organizer was told to send in 2 or 3 questions ahead of time that Biden would answer. And then they say, at some events, the Biden campaign printed the pre-approved questions on note cards and then gave donors the cards to read the questions. Even with all these steps, Biden made flubs, which confounded the donors who knew that Biden had the questions ahead of time. Right? So you've got these events where, I mean, this is already the fucked up thing about American politics, right? Where you've got these sort of round tables with a bunch of donors who are all invited to this dinner to have direct access to Joe Biden. But of course, there's no point in having direct access to Joe Biden when he can't understand your question unless it's been delivered to him beforehand. And then when you sort of have your card, which you read from, you know, like if you're in the question time audience, for example, he still doesn't know the answer, even though he's specifically been told these are the questions you're going to be asked and these are how you should answer them. The report ends in the final days of Joe Biden's campaign. On July 13, Biden held an uncomfortable call with a group of Democratic lawmakers called the New Democrat Coalition, aimed at reassuring them about his ability to stay in the race. The president told participants that polling showed he was doing fine. He became angry when challenged, according to lawmakers on the call. At one point, Biden looked up and abruptly told the group he had to go to church. Some lawmakers on the call believed someone behind the camera was shutting it down. Biden dropped out of the race 8 days later. Aaron, it's our last show of the year. I imagine this is the last time we're going to be talking about Joe Biden for any significant amount of time on Novara Live. But I do think the Democrats basically handing the presidency to Donald Trump because the people around Joe Biden thought it was acceptable to put this man forward for another 4 years when they had to tell senior Democrats, oh, he's having a bad day today, so we're going to have to reschedule. I mean, it is a pretty remarkable way for the the republic to fall. I mean, if you believe the Democrats' rhetoric earlier in the year, that's what they thought a Trump election would mean.
Well, guess what, Michael? The Democratic Party establishment is full of crap. They're full of garbage. You said you're right to say this as well. It's one thing to put him up once. It's a crisis election. You get rid of Trump. You have the quote unquote resistance. You have COVID. But the second time, just crazy. And I think, frankly, you look at the details of this story, Michael. The Democratic Party have lost any right whatsoever to ever run the United States, certainly to ever send someone to the Oval Office ever again. If you were a floating voter and you read that, you would think, well, look, I don't like Donald Trump, but at least the Republican establishment tried to stop the guy. In the case of the Democrats, they were pushing it. He was their dude. He could barely form words, like you say. He was sometimes treated like a toddler. Oh, he's having a bad day. He literally can start a nuclear war. He has executive powers. He has extraordinary powers, the President of the United States. Oh, he has a bad day. He can't talk today. That is how you talk about a 2 or 3 year old. And so I think, frankly, it does, like I've just said a moment ago, underscore the fact that Democrats should never, ever send another president to the Oval Office ever again. This was their plan. This was the blueprint. Whereas Trump, at least, like I say, the Republicans can say it was an aberration. We never wanted the guy. Absolutely crazy. And then you go to the point about donors. Michael, what sort of person does it take to give $50, $100 million, $10 million, $1 million to a political organization? You're giving that money for status or because you believe in it or nepotism or whatever. For whatever reason, you're giving a lot of money to an organization like the Democrats, and they raised a heck of a lot during the last election campaign, right? And then this guy's in charge. Someone who literally can't formulate full sentences. I mean, how does that make you feel? Surely you'd think, this is a waste of money. Why am I wasting my money? There are so many other causes I could give it to. And this is, the country which talks about being the mother of democracies. It exports democracy all around the world. And yet you have a party establishment which stitched up, I think, Biden in 2020. Not to the same extent that Hillary was stitched up in 2016 against Bernie Sanders, but clearly there was a move to get Biden, and he was the unity candidate, the stop Bernie candidate in 2020. And this was the person who they had to push ultimately, so they could keep Bernie Sanders out and all his brochurists out, who, by the way, many of which went on to vote for Trump. It really does say a hell of a lot about the idiocy of the American liberal establishment.
I think it could also be really embarrassing for the Democratic, but I don't want to predict someone's end. But it's very plausible that Joe Biden, doesn't last the next 4 years, and so it is going to be really obviously, when a big politician dies in the United States or in any country, really, you have this big outpouring of sort of public, commentary or idolizing about them, and if that does happen in the next 4 years, that's going to be another example where everyone is pointing to these guys and saying, this was the guy you told us was fit and strong and could, be a really sprightly, brilliant president for another 4 years. I'm wondering if we're going to see, a kind of the Death of Stalin type movie, which is based on those 4 years of trying to pretend that Joe Biden was completely fine the whole time.